And it is Anzac Day, a very special day on our calendar here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And we have the immense privilege of having a chat with war veteran Allister Baker, who is currently studying psychology at the University of Canterbury. So welcome to the show. Kia ora.
Kia ora, guys, and thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and talk a bit about my experiences with you.
Yeah, and can we just say first of as well, thank you for your service on this Anzac Day.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And that's something I want to, I like when people do because it makes me feel like, I was appreciated for what I did. So I really appreciate you saying that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, you're very welcome. I mean, we'd love to know from your background as well. I know we're going to be talking about your studies as well in just a moment, but what motivated you to join the armed services in the first place?
Yeah, so nothing fancy or anything like that, but I enjoyed the outdoors. I liked being out and about, and I enjoyed a bit of hunting with my old man. And then I also enjoyed a lot of Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, and of course, lots of his roles in his movies was being in the military. So it appealed to me, and then once I left school and I worked for a little bit, I decided actually I really want to give that a go and see what it's like. And once I got in, and once I realised, how proud my family was and how proud I felt to be serving my country, I realised this was something I wanted to do.
Well, it's an incredible mantle to serve one's country like what you have done. So let's talk about that experience and sort of what led you to actually undertake the line of study. So you're currently studying psychology at the University of Canterbury. So what kind of led for you to take this shift here?
So I've done 3 deployments or 3 operational services with the military. I deployed to East Timor pretty much straight after my initial training. I'd only been in the army for 7 months, and I was deployed to East Timor in 2006. And then I also redeployed to East Timor in 2008 and saw the difference we could make through our peacekeeping operations and how we improved the infrastructure of East Timor over that time. And that's what inspired me to then go to Afghanistan and do a similar thing. Unfortunately, that was a much more dangerous environment. And on the 4th of August 2010, we were contacted from an improvised explosive device, or IED, and we took small arms fire and rocket barrel grenades. When it initially happened, I actually thought our driver had crashed because we'd been going along for 4 months and nothing had happened. And so I thought, oh no, Matt Ball, our driver, had a crash and the head was getting knocked around the turret. And then it wasn't until I heard this crack and this whistle in very close proximity of my head that I realised, oh wow, this is it. We're in a firefight. So I looked for my 50 caliber machine gun, and that had actually been blown clean off the turret. Wow. And then I looked for my secondary machine gun, and that also was charred and burned, and I deemed it unsafe to fire. And then I looked down I actually had a 3rd machine gun and thought, okay, I can fight the firefight with this one. And that's when I realised the true magnitude of the situation we were in. And because the vehicle was on fire, and I realised, okay, now it's going to be about preserving life as opposed to actually fighting the firefight. So I rolled off the turret because I had to go out over top of the vehicle rather than through it because it was on fire. And as I rolled off the turret and landed on the ground, quite a long way down from the top of a Humvee, I saw Tim O'Donnell, Lieutenant Tim O'Donnell, my commander and good friend, and his body was bloody and charred. And then I realised, okay, we need to get out of here. So it became first aid mode. I yelled out to the driver, and he sort of regained consciousness and under fire came round to my side of the vehicle. And we spent what felt like hours, but it was probably 20 minutes or so, trying to pull Tim O'Donnell out of that vehicle. Unfortunately, it got to the point where we were taking too much incoming fire and the entire vehicle was becoming engulfed in flames. Rounds were cooking off. You could hear them popping, and we knew that there was actually explosives in there. So we made that decision, a very hard decision to make, not one I would want anyone else to ever have to go through. But we had to leave Tim behind and crawl down that riverbed and get out of there. And moments later, the vehicle actually exploded, and I witnessed Tim's remains airborne and landing not far from our position.
Look, when you share this, Allister, like I'm already thinking there's so many elements of this story already that would leave such a mark psychologically, but also emotionally, maybe even spiritually with people. Tell us about that in terms of maybe the post-traumatic effects of something like that, because again, you're a veteran yourself, but this story has been multiplied out through multitudes of lives of New Zealanders who have served their country in this way. Yes. How does that affect people who've been in these situations?
And that's exactly why I like to tell it, because it takes huge courage. I mean, it takes me a lot, and it's taken me years to be able to tell it and present it in a way where I don't start to fall apart as I tell it and I get highly emotional. There's definitely some emotions going on, but I'm trying to present it because it's important to tell my story, because if I can tell it, then I can raise awareness for New Zealanders to actually the things that our soldiers can experience. And, I'm only 37, so I'm a younger veteran. I'm not, World War II vet or a Vietnam vet, but I've been through this, and so have a lot of other people my age and even younger than me. And so it definitely takes a toll. And it took me 7 years after that event to actually come to terms with what I'd witnessed. I was isolating myself from people. I was pushing family members away. I wasn't myself. And fortunately, things like the Invictus Games and competing in the Invictus Games and serving my country, serving my defence force, and meeting like-minded individuals made me realise that actually there's a lot of people dealing with this. And the more we get together and the more we try and help each other, the more we can make this situation, or we can reduce our symptoms of PTSD and moral injury that we're experiencing.
Yeah, well,
it's definitely a challenge.
Thank you for sharing. And I can't even begin to imagine what it's like for you and what other people have been through in service. So your experiences led you to go and study psychology at the University of Canterbury. So what do you hope to achieve through your studies?
Correct. Yeah. So I mean, obviously, I got deemed unfit to work in a physical job about 4 years ago, and so I had to go. Well, what do I actually have? I only know how to be a soldier, and I only knew how to be an electrician, which I got post my injuries. And then I thought, okay, I need to do something, and I actually have huge life experience with post-traumatic stress and dealing with adversity, and I've learned to conquer that. But other people haven't. Other people haven't got the support networks. They haven't got the resilience I've got. So how can I help other people deal with that situation? And psychology seemed like a good fit for me. It was, University of Canterbury offered it as courses. And so, yeah, I enrolled at the university and I've graduated with a Bachelor of Arts with first class honours. And now I'm moving on to a PhD this year. And so, what I want to achieve through that is doing more and more research, getting more and more data to show why our veterans are struggling, where we can provide preventative treatment so that we can reduce those symptoms of PTSD and moral injury. So, hopefully, we can make it easier when our soldiers leave the military and they become civilians and they're veterans. We can actually make it an easier transition in life and make them actually still be proud of their service and not resent it because of what it's done to them.
And just before, you touched on a really difficult situation that you faced and how often in these situations war veterans can experience moral injury. So let's talk about moral injury. What does that actually mean?
Yeah, of course. So moral injury is perpetrating, failing to prevent or bearing witness to an event that basically is against your moral values or beliefs. So essentially perpetrating. So in a military culture, you may have to take human life. There may be collateral damage. A civilian may be killed in part of the mission or what you do. So that's perpetrating an event, and that's against our moral values. I mean, most of us, a lot of people value human life as sacred. And to take a human life or to fail to save a human life is against our values. And you might also just bear witness to. So you might see a colleague or a comrade have to kill someone, and then that might be a struggle for you. And so the symptoms of moral injury is anger. So you might be angry at that person for having to kill someone. You're like, why did you do that? Or you might be angry at the organisation that sent you there. For me, the military sent me to Afghanistan, and then there wasn't necessarily all the things in place to help me deal with that situation when I returned. So I definitely felt anger towards the organisation. I've since more proud of my service now because I realised that it was moral injury that sort of put me in that position. But there's also shame. You can be ashamed of the things you did, and you can feel guilty. Survivor's guilt. I mean, I definitely felt guilty for having to leave Tim behind. So I definitely struggled with survivor's guilt as to why am I here. And a big component of that is existential crisis or religious crisis is, why do I still fit in the world? I've done something against my moral values. Human life is sacred. I've not been able to save a human life, or I've had to take a human life. And so now actually, God wants us to preserve life. He wants us to look after life and look after our fellow man. But I wasn't able to do that. And actually, I didn't have to do it, but other soldiers have had to take other human lives as part of combat. And so then how do you come to terms with the fact that you've gone against your own religion? And it can definitely be a huge challenge. And whilst in the military, the big thing is that these moral dilemmas can be, or things like killing can be normalized within military culture. And you have the support network of people in that military environment. But once you become a veteran and you leave military culture, you no longer perceive killing as normal because a lot of civilians will say to you, no, actually, it's not right to take a human life. And you might go to your church and then people are like, oh, well, you had to do that. Like that's wrong. That's against our religion. And so you then can suffer from moral injury and you can feel that shame and guilt around those situations. And we need to be helping our veterans with that transition process from military culture to civilian culture.
Yeah, let's talk about that because as you mentioned, there can be the moment when that action is taken. But in some senses, I think the recovery from that can take much longer. You've come back to your country of origin after you've served. This thing has happened, and then suddenly, well, the reception is perhaps not what we'd hope for people who've committed themselves to serving New Zealand, and some would say one of the most committed means possible. I mean, you put your literal life on the line here. But how do you feel veterans are treated in New Zealand?
I think it's getting a lot better. I'm definitely seeing lots more improvements. Like already you said, thank you for your service. Now, in 2010, when I came back, that didn't happen. I don't think anyone thanked me for my service. So it's definitely getting better. And I think a lot of that's from, the national RSA, and a lot of RSAs are, sort of getting the poppy campaigns out, and we're raising awareness around how our veterans are dealing with the situations. But there's a lot of legislation and policy that can make things difficult too. You can be struggling with something that doesn't fit within legislation, and so certain organisations can't provide you funding and support, and you don't know where to look. You don't know who to reach out to. So instead of that, you then take it out on your family members, you take it out on people around you, and you're not getting that support, and so you're isolated. And then our veterans can end up with suicidal ideations. And that's not what we want. You shouldn't feel like you have to take your own life for serving your country.
Yeah.
But the support is getting better. But the more awareness we raise for people, the more the public can help, the more they can contribute to things like the Poppy Trust. And just when they meet someone that's a veteran, they can say, oh my God, thank you for your service. If you need anything, I'm here, that sort of thing. Our communities, if you have a community, those people can be supportive and say, hey, look, what you did, I don't necessarily agree with it, but hey, you were in the military and that's part of that life. So that's okay. What you did there, that's separate from who you are as a person. You're actually a great person, and it's okay what you went through. We're here for you. We love you. We support you.
Allister, you've really opened our eyes to many different things that people face when they come out of military service. So let's talk about the improvements. Like what areas do you think could be improved when it comes to looking after our veterans in New Zealand?
I definitely think providing them with a lot of mental health support. I think that as Kiwis, and especially in the military, is that we hold back. We think, okay, no, harden up. We're Kiwis. We're Kiwi blokes. We're nothing. It's not going to get to me. But actually, it does, and it really does. It took me 7 years, and then I realised, man, I was destroying my life because of what happened to me. And it's saying, hey, look, you deployed overseas, so we're going to give you all these entitlements, and it can be discreet. Like, hey, look, you can go see a psychologist. We're not going to put it on your career profile. The military is never going to stop your career progression because you're seeing a psychologist, because it's just part of that journey. You need some help. You need to talk around it, and you'll be a better soldier and a better person because we're helping you with that mental health support. And we know in New Zealand, our mental health support system isn't fantastic. That's improving, but definitely I would say the mental health is a huge aspect, which can then also reduce the impact of physical injuries. I have a physical injury, and the more stress and the more I feel my guilt and my shame around the things I went through, the more my physical injury actually impacts me and increased pain, things like that. So addressing the mental health is a huge component and would make a huge difference for our veterans. But also financial support. They come back and they may go out into civilian culture, and then because of their mental health and their injuries, they're unable to work all the time. They struggle being around people. And so they may need some financial support getting through those steps and being supported by companies and businesses, which I know that the Return Services Association is trying to help with, but they do need more help with creating those career opportunities for our veterans.
Well, look, Allister, we're just so grateful that people like you have had the courage to speak about these experiences, and hopefully we can raise some more awareness for people as well. And once again, on behalf of us, and I know for everybody listening, thank you for your service. Thank you for putting yourself on the line for us. You did something much more courageous than any of us have done. So, no, thank you again.
Yeah, thank you so much,
Thanks,
Allister.
guys. Really appreciate it.
We really appreciate
Thanks for taking the time to hear me. Yeah, cheers.
Hey, we really hope you enjoyed that video.
Make sure you like and subscribe and turn your notifications on.
And I hope you enjoy the next one.
Yeah, we'll catch you then.